The curtain raises in a few days on the long-awaited hearings of the January 6th committee. They've got kind of a daunting task. They've got 6 to 8 hearings to serve up a comprehensive account of a series of episodes, just culminating in the January 6th melee to stop the lawful transfer of power. Let's start here. Who is their primary target audience as you see it? And what are the metrics that you'll be looking to measure success or failure of the hearings as a whole?
Well, my view is it's going to be the American people. And as a House impeachment manager for the second impeachment trial, by the way, I think it's funny I have to designate which impeachment trial it is because the former president was just that bad. But we presented at that time what we knew, which is that January 6th wasn't just a one-day event. There was a whole buildup to it by the former president and his advisors with the big lie. There was planning, and then there were actions after January 6th. So the January 6th committee is going to show the American people much more in depth what happened both before, during, and after January 6th. And I really look forward to what they have to show.
Yeah, and we're hearing about the 1,000 witnesses who interviewed behind the scenes just by happenstance. A couple days ago, a memo is discovered that takes this whole thing back to shortly after the election. But I mean, they don't have that much time, and don't they have competing goals? I mean, it's one thing to be comprehensive as they aim to be. It's another thing to never be dull. Yeah. Or and that, I'm sure you face that somewhat, Congressman, but they've got a kind of bigger task on their hands. Julie, Josh, do you agree?
To Congressman Lieu's point, obviously the American people are the target, but we also we need to be keeping people's attention during a time of the year where people's attention is waning and, frankly, getting a little overwhelmed with everything going on. But in particular, I mean, this has got to continue to be a galvanizing issue for Democrats, for independents in the midterms, and making sure that they are actually tuning in, finding out online, reading about, seeing clips, and of course, watching on TV what's going on, and having the committee make the case so that folks are not forgetting how close we have been becoming to losing our democracy, and keeping that in mind when they're heading to the ballot box in the primaries, and then, of course, again in November.
What's your sense, anyone, of what it's going to sort of look like? 6 to 8 hearings, what kind, who questions, what's the sort of mix of documentary evidence and live testimony? Will the live witnesses all be sort of friendly and prepped, or will they, roll the dice on, say, an Ivanka Trump? How's it actually going to be choreographed? Do we have a sense of that yet?
I hope it is not just friendly witnesses. And I think I saw, or some story the last few days that they may lead off with Judge Luttig and that's good. He was involved not as a conspirator, but as someone trying to kind of keep things on the rails. He's obviously he's a very conservative Republican. But at the end of the day, he's a friendly witness. He's
right.
Another person who agrees how horrible it was and stuff. And we seem to have gotten away to some extent from, no, let's bring up some of the people who are going to be belligerent and not want to be there, or at least, kind of want to do some kind of combat. I hope it's not just.
Yeah, I mean, I get that vibe as well, that they're proceeding on a first do no harm principle, that they're very aware of how this will be digested, post-digested, ruminated in sound bites, and that the risk of a rough moment might be, not worth running next to a series of fairly clean. But again, that means they're not going for the stars with dramatic witnesses either. Congressman, do you have and obviously we're not asking you to talk out of school, but you face some of these same questions during the impeachment. You know, as between little bite size, move the ball, you know, safely down the field, 3-yard passes or whatever, and mixing it up with trying some, you know, things that might fall incomplete. What's your sense of where they're going?
I believe it'll be a multimedia presentation. That's what we did during the impeachment trial as well. There is something about moving pictures with audio added to it that is compelling, and I do think they're going to show videos. I also think they don't have to capture all 27,000 facts related to January 6th. They just have to tell a simple story of what led up to it, why it happened, and then actions afterwards. And I think it's better to be simple because, again, the American people are busy, right? They have lots of things going on in their lives. They may not watch every one of these hearings. So they just have to be able to present a very digestible version of what happened on January 6th and why it can never happen again.
Yeah. And I mean, look, they're going to have a
that.
report. We're going to have the doorstop that hopefully puts everything in. But they are, you know, biting off for themselves some effort to be comprehensive as well. So Josh, let me just follow up with you. And I know this is just your, you know, what you would do if you were in that chair, but what kinds of sort of dramatic moments do you envision or would you hope to see if you were the sort of director of proceedings?
You know, there was, you know, I think we know from the Watergate hearings, there were some of the most interesting things were from semi-friendly witnesses. Let's put it that way. People who were kind of in the mix and, you know, knew what was happening, but were no longer sort of, you know, on board. And those people, there were, you know, the famous moment of like, you know, was there any taping? You know,
right.
Well, in fact, there was, you know, kind of stuff
which
like that.
Apparently was actually a surprise, right? Sam Ervin's like, we don't see that happening in this.
Yeah, I think it was one of those ones where kind of like some of this you know, staff members had gotten that, but at least the actual you know, the members of the committee, it was new to them, and I think it was sort of unclear whether he would go there. So yeah, there actually was some legitimate drama there. You know, I don't know what kind of dramatic stuff like that we're necessarily going to get. I think I would answer that by going back to one of your earlier questions of kind of, you know, what's the goal? Who's the audience?
Right.
And the congressman's right. The audience is the American people, but within the American people, I think we know that, you know, about a third of the population likes what happened. So there's kind of nothing much to do there. I mean, they're the constituency of the insurrectionists, right? And you have at least that much on the other side who is totally convinced. And what I don't want to, it's not a kind of a standard like, oh, you got to go for the middle. It's more, there is a clear majority of people in this country who know what happened there was wrong, and who know what happened in the lead up to it was wrong. I think the key is that the committee has to make some real progress in getting back to the perception of the event, the sense of the importance of the event that people had in the weeks just after January 6th, when people were like, holy crap, how could this have happened? And you need to get back to that. You need to take probably 20% of the population who knows what happened up there was wrong, was kind of like, okay, that happened. You know, a lot of things happen, and it happened and it's done. And you know, my gas filled a tank of gas and it's more than $5 a gallon. You need to get past that. You need to kind of, you know, bring it right back to the center again. And that is, you know, that's just a matter of kind of getting everybody's attention. And you know, one thing that there was, I think it was like an Axios, one of these, you know, kind of insider publications yesterday or something, where they, you know, had the kind of, you know, the scoop on, you know, the comms op that Trump and basically all congressional Republicans are going to have to counter program. And I think what they will need to do is, notwithstanding this counter programming, to get out of that mode in which this is, you know, in a political, you know, in a
He said,
political
she
campaign.
said,
Yeah,
politicized
in a
event,
political
right.
campaign when no one is trying to violently overthrow the government. Yeah, one side says this, one side says that. You kind of that's the sort of the nature of that interaction. But here, you need to kind of get out of that, because what we're talking about was an effort to violently overthrow the government, and the U.S. Constitution, and that should not be a question of political combat within the political system. And what you have here is you have one party basically openly on the side of the insurrection. You're counter-programming the investigation. You don't want there to be an investigation. You want to say what happened was fine. So I think the challenge they have is not only not to be counter-programmed, but to get people back to, wait a second, like maybe you didn't have anything to do with it, but you're saying it was okay? Or you're saying you want to kind of kneecap the investigation? Because it's very striking where this is right now, that you have, you know, there were a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill that maybe should have done more, but were not specifically involved. They were not breaking down the doors. They weren't even challenging the votes, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. But now they are in effect championing the insurrection. And so they need to get it out of that kind of mode where it's a kind of like, you know, who's doing better? Like, well, within the political system, no one should be doing better or not. This was an attack on the political system itself. And if you think that's okay, you're outside of the legitimate political system.